Many esports run best of 3s for their tournaments, and best of 5s for more important matches. Some even do best of 7, like, some professional sports leagues in America. So today's question is the following. Should Mario Kart competitions follow suit, and is it actually better for us? Let's get into it. To start this video, I want to talk about one of many ideas that Dragmeyer shared with me this past year. I had many that I agreed with him on, and one of the most interesting ones to bring up was essentially turning our matches into best of 12 wars, where winning each race would act as a game win. This would be similar to most other esports, and if there were no tied races, then it'd be a best of 13. Now, this idea is different, and different is scary, and upon thinking about its implications, I strongly disagreed with him on this one, and with its potential implication, even inside tournament formats. And I want to talk about why, because I think really the reasoning behind why is important. So the short answer is that how much you win each race by absolutely matters. I know there's going to be some rebuttal. A lot of sports don't care about how much you win each game. A baseball playoff series is completely fine if letting a team that wins a game 15-2 lose a series, and getting a 4-stock victory in Melee counts exactly the same as a last hit win. So one might ask, why do you care so much about the margin of victory in Mario Kart competitions? Well, it has to do with game objectives. So let's go back to the Smash example. If you are starting an ordinary game, what do you want to accomplish in order to win the next game? Well, you want to hit your opponent and not get hit yourself. I know that's a very summarized version of it, but more or less that is the goal. Now, if you were going into a game wanting to not lose a stock, what changes? Well, maybe a few risks that you take may be slightly different. Maybe you go for a bigger option because you need to get the last stock now, but I don't think it's actually a ton of change. You still have to play neutral to make sure you don't get hit, and you have to hit the opponent. Now, you might not take all the same risks like mentioned, but the point is that the objective remains very similar. In baseball, whether you're up 2-1 or 10-1, when you're at bat, you're going to try to get a base hit, a walk, get on base, avoid getting out, and to score as many runs as possible. That remains constant. And winning a race in a Mario Kart 6v6 is not like this at all. So, here's the thing. If all you had to do in every race in Mario Kart Wars was win each race, so 42-40, etc., 31-30, whatever you want to say, you're effectively saying that 42-40 equals 62-20, and when that happens, the objective changes every single race. And in my opinion, it changes in a way that dumbs things down. So Mario Kart is a game of risk. Decisions are constantly made where players have to weigh the potential gain and loss of those decisions. And it also means that every position matters, and finding a way to finish 8th over 11th is valuable. Successes don't have to be limited to just first place. Now recently at MomoCon, the first round of the doubles Mario Kart tournament was based around race wins initially, and this drove me crazy. It meant that getting first place was the only thing that mattered in this format because getting first place guaranteed a race win in 2 versus 2. But the thing is that going for top 2 is riskier than just holding first. We should want teams going for something harder over being complacent. 1-4 is not the same as top 2. But let's talk about actual race objectives. So when you think about 6v6 again, think about the shock, or the lightning bolt. How is that used in wars, and think about it. Because you would realize that a race win scoring system would completely change the game because of this item. Most shocks can be used to obtain a winning race, quite frankly. Now, those shocks don't have to really be used exceptionally well in order to win the race, but a good shock can be used to seal massive gains that have a larger effect on the final outcome of a game. So if there's no incentive to win a race by a large amount, there is no incentive to plan out shocks very well or to take major risks when things are relatively neutral. And I think this is really bad because we don't want to reward simply obtaining a shock in the first place. There's a lot of things opposing teams can do to limit just how much damage a shock does, and a lot of value gained by stopping the good ones from happening. But sometimes that won't matter if the only thing that matters is getting a race win. The faster the use, the less risk there is in losing the shock to the other team. But the current trade-off is that quickly spamming shocks usually provides very little value in our current meta as opposed to using one that's more planned out. And the other thing worth mentioning is having to go for shocks itself is a risk. It's a stated disadvantage. Part of that risk of sacrificing yourself to go for the shock is that it's, well, a sacrifice. And if you don't get it, how much you lose by will be even more. So if a minus 24 race is suddenly equivalent to a minus 2 race, then that actually eliminates the risk of bagging to begin with. Because if you were already going to lose the race before it, you just do it. So when the margin of victory matters, you may be sacrificing even more points when you go for the shock, and if you don't get it, well, you shouldn't have been in all the bottom spots to begin with. So it should also be mentioned, but shocks aside, top 3s are automatically race wins. What this means is if your team has top 3, how the rest of the race plays out doesn't really matter. It's sad, I think, because a top 4 is quite frankly more impressive than a top 3. So in summary, I don't think that you can treat all winning races equal in this game just because the objective changes. If you want to get out a quick shock, well, you can do that. And sometimes you don't even have to dodge everybody on your team, because if you dodge one person, maybe that's enough to seal a win without, the other team knowing the wiser. Now, I assume that everyone's in agreement with me up to this point, that race wins are not the way to go when talking about Mario Kart formats. And one thing that has also been a popular suggestion in the past is actually very similar, and that being the idea of best of 3 Grand Prix, so sets of 4 races, over traditional 12 race wars. I think this is one of those ideas that people ask for, but would probably hate the second they have to do it. Now, this is effectively the same concept as race wins, but it's a little bit of a step up at least. Now, let's be clear here. This would be better than doing race wins, but at the same time, I fail to see what actually makes it better than traditional wars already. At the end of the day, a lot of what I detailed earlier still applies here. How much each race is won by matters in this game, and wars may be a set of 12 races right now, but each race isn't exactly even. In an evenly matched war, the expectation is that the majority of the races end pretty closely. It's the team that is able to crank out the few bigger races that usually takes these wars. And when you look at best of 3 Grand Prix as a format, it becomes clear to me that it becomes a completely arbitrary way of assigning greater importance to certain races. So it's possible, let's say that a team gets outshocked 8-4 in a war, but still goes on to win 494-490 as an example. So let's consider how best of 3 GPs could change the result. So let's say the shock count was 3-1 GP1 and GP3 and favor the team that got more shots. And in GP2, it was 2-2, so deadlock even. That advantage may propel the shock-heavy team to win Grand Prix 1 and 3 while losing the 2-2 one by a solid chunk. And in this instance, the team that scores 490 may actually win 2-1. However, if the count was something along the lines of 3-2, 2-1, 3-2 instead, maybe the GP win ends up 2-1 in favor of the team that scored 494. So perhaps not getting outshocked by 2 in a GP is enough to make a difference. I want to point out also that pulling a shock isn't necessarily luck also. I'm just using it as an example to point out that a war with the same gameplay could have different results depending on which course was race 4 and which was race 5. And I don't think we should be running formats, quite frankly, where swapping the 2 races could flip the match winner. Because that's just arguing the order of races more than it is just accurately keeping records of who played better. I think the winner should be decided solely based on what happens on the track. And there's an RNG factor here in best of 3 GPs that doesn't even need to exist. So the other thing is we don't have counter picks in this game. There's nothing too different about races 5 to 8 from races 1 to 4, unlike a game 1 versus game 2 in a traditional, fighting game that uses game counts for competitive matches. So I guess one idea for this would be to allow free choice for races 1 to 4, and then whoever loses GP1 gets to choose 4 tracks in a row. And if they're able to win that GP and take it to a third one, then the first team that won the first 4 races get to choose the last 4 in that one. Again, that may be pretty severe. Maybe it should be like 3-1 picks. And it may make the focus more on track picks than anything else, so I don't really know, but that's a thought if you want to actually try to justify best of 3 GPs. But anyways, let's just look at one more extreme example of what can happen if we were to go about doing this. So, like I mentioned, the idea of, having 3 GPs just feels arbitrary. In this normal war right here, this is a blowout loss. But if you break it up into 3 sections, it would actually end up being a win for the team that lost. And this is because the big races for the one team that dominated all just happen to be around the same area in the war. Thus, they don't really get their full effect counted, and if they were, say, maybe in another place, then it changes everything. If you were to swap races 4 and 5, and as well as races 8 and 9, then the same team that we're declaring just won would lose 3-0. It'd be a sweep. So I think that's kind of crazy. In summary, the order of races is arbitrary, and Best of 3 Grand Prix does not tell us much about who actually was the better team. It is just about when you do well, and that can come down to luck, to be honest. And obviously, this is an extreme example, but examples would come up more frequently than I think people would like to admit. From what I see, this format idea isn't too popular. It gets recommended every once in a while, and people may be interested in seeing how it goes, but there's never really been a serious push. However, there is one final thing to talk about here that I believe is popular, and that's Best of 3 Wars. So we currently see Best of 3s exclusively in the MKU playoffs, but is it a good thing? Well, I think having a Best of 3 in the playoffs kind of adds to the grandiose feeling of MKU. You know, it's the playoffs, it feels epic, and maybe this is fine. It's not like having 3 wars is going to make it harder to cheese a playoff round victory by any means, rather than just doing one. But again, I do want to ask, why have we been against Best of 3 GPs for the most part, yet have so much support for Best of 3 wars in our MKU finals? When taking a look at the whole arbitrary cutoffs thing, that still applies here. If a team takes game 1 by 30, gets completely demolished in match 2, loses by 150, but they're able to clutch game 3 by 2 points, who played better across the series? Because match 3 was quite literally nearly a tie. Like, just one person just like passing another person on the line in 11th from being a tie in overtime. That's all it would have taken to flip the third match result. Game 1 was a decent win. 1 was an obliteration. You would think that if the third game was kind of a tie, or at least close to a tie, that the team that had the obliteration in their favor would be the series winner. But that's not always the case. This whole concept gets a little muddied to begin with because there is a mindset that wars must be 12 races as well. And 12 races, despite it working for so long, is also an arbitrary number. We often think of our best of 3s like we would think of Smash best of 3s, but there is a difference. A game of Smash is a game of Smash. A game of MKU is 12 games of Mario Kart. So who decides that the cutoff is 12? Like, it is the same ordeal with best of 3 GPs, it's just a larger scale version of them. So here's the other thing. There's another big difference between us and professional athletes playing best of 7 series. These 7-game series don't happen on the same day for a wide variety of reasons. Usually athletes can't physically go anymore by the time one game ends, and their games are longer and can't be finished in a single day. And of course there's, the money factor. There's money to be made off of having a bunch of different matches on different nights and buying tickets and having more ratings and all that. But usually you want every night to have a conclusion of some sort. So it makes sense to have game winners, as in, there's a winner of game 1, a winner of game 2, in these sports. And many sports, they want playoff series to stick out. So the normal match length isn't really an option. Series is the only option. For us, none of this really applies because we're actually locked into doing each game one after another in MKU, and there isn't really currently financial reasons to do it otherwise. We kinda just do extra games because we want to. As mentioned, having more than one war will still make it so the better team tends to win more. The question is just if a better option would be to just extend the amount of races of a single war instead of having a best of 3 series. If you really think about it, a best of 3 war series is just a best of 3 Grand Prix match where the Grand Prix are 12 races. Just, there's looser repick guidelines. So would just playing 24 or 36 races actually be a more fair solution? The answer is honestly probably. I know there's a lot of natural resistance to this kind of idea. It even feels weird to me. But I had this conversation in the MK8 server's tournament discussion channel, and a few concerns were brought up, and I want to address all of them here as well. Concern number 1. People are not going to play 36 races in a row without breaks. And personally, I agree. There could still be breaks every 12 courses if that's what's deemed reasonable, or you would just have to think of each war as a period in hockey, or if you end up doing 24 race wars, it'd be halves. Concern 2, how would repicks work? Well, I think you could still reset them on every break period, but with 96 courses bound to be in the game, it may not even be that crazy of an idea to consider not allowing repicks at all, especially if it were only 24 races. It might even be a benefit. Concern number 3, there'd be a mercy rule, right? Well, probably. I mean, we've had a few matches get out of hand in 12 races already. For bracket tournaments, I think we actually need to discuss the ideas of wars ending earlier to begin with too, based on the score and all that, but we can address that another time. Concern number 4, being down 100 after 12 races is more demotivating than being down 1-0. Well, being down 100 points is that team's fault. My counter argument is that I think it would be even more demotivating if you were down 1-0 instead of down 10 after 12 races, because you likely played decently well and got nothing out of it in that circumstance. The good races you had may just be wasted in a sense. And concern 5, war should just be 12 races. Well, should they? I mean, I think it feels right, because that's what we've been playing for a while. That's what I've been playing for quite a bit of time. But to be fair, the other argument is why something other than 12, because really any claim that you make is arbitrary. So really, this is a rare circumstance of it always being this way, being a valid argument. And 45 minutes feels about right for MKU and stuff. Part of the reason why I like double elimination more than best of 3 is that there is a function to winning every match in the form of advancement. It's awkward, in my opinion, if a team gets a war win, after 12 races, then lines up 5 minutes later to play race 13 against, well, the same team. And even with a bracket reset in double elimination, winning a war is still resetting the bracket. It serves a purpose, as both teams aren't on an even playing field going into the grand finals. When both teams are on an even playing field, though, like in MKU finals, and they're told the best of 3, what feels most fair at that point is to not run best of whatever number. It's just, well, you guys are starting at this point and ending at this point. Just play these amount of races. But when some team starts in the losers bracket, then there's the chance that it could end after 12 because the tournament would be over. So it's not quite the same because the playing field is not identical going into it. When you have 2 even teams, it's, okay, here's a competition, the winner wins the tournament. There's an extra condition in double elimination. So the whole situation just makes me think that best of 3s in generals are just really weird for MK. We can choose to ignore it, but I encourage us to think about why we do the things we choose to do. Usually I do suggest a change in these topics. This is actually not that video, and I don't have a conclusion like that. I just want to challenge the status quo, or to get us thinking really, because to be honest, I don't think anything needs to be changed. I think it's okay to admit even that our finals aren't necessarily attempting to ensure the best team wins, rather just be a fine line between good enough and entertaining. And I think that's okay for our purposes. But what do you think? Leave a comment if you like best of 3, if you think what we're talking about in this video is valid and all of that, because I don't even know if it's arguable. I think 36 races is just a more skill-based result than a best of 3 would be. Now a best of 3 is still more of a skill-based result than just 12 races, but I would say that there's a debate to be had here on what's actually optimal. So hopefully this gets people thinking, and we'll see what happens about it. I don't think that any change is going to occur as a result, but it'll be certainly interesting to talk about. So thanks for listening, and we will see you in the next one.